Hello, Bible Bowl coaches. We are so happy that you have chosen to volunteer your time to help to coach our young people for Bible Bowl. Some of you are new to Bible Bowl, some of you are returning, some of you are veterans. And so this training video is serving as a tutorial of how to write questions, effective questions that will prepare our Bible Bowl scholars for competition. And so we're going to go over some tips, and I know it may seem daunting, it may seem like, an overwhelming task to write questions for so many chapters, so many verses, but we're going to go over what makes the questions a little bit more effective and how we can help our young people to retain the information. Now, when you're writing general questions, you want to make sure that you pay attention to the who, what, when, where, and how of all the information that's in that verse. Particularly because you want to be able to ask the question in different ways so that the children get used to learning the information from a different angle, because you may be asking the question of who did what, and then they get to the competition and they're like, what did who, this individual, do? So you will find that even with one verse, you will be able to get, sometimes 2 or 3 different questions from the one verse. So we'll get into it and show you an example. Here's one. Now let's look at our first general question, right? And we're focusing on Mark chapter 9, verse 2. And after 6 days, Jesus taketh with him Peter and James and John, and leadeth them up into an high mountain apart by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. Now the first thing we're going to look at is a when question, and we would ask, after how many days did Jesus take Peter, James, and John into a high mountain apart by themselves? And the answer is 6 days. Now keep in mind, you don't have to do this for every single verse, but for those that are packed with information. So the who question is, who did Jesus take into a high mountain apart by themselves? And then you see there the answer is Peter, James, and John. Now moving into the where question. After 6 days, where did Jesus take Peter, James, and John apart by themselves? The answer is a high mountain. And now for the what. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John to a high mountain. What happened before them? He was transfigured. Another type of question that you will want to write are fill in the blanks. And I love these because it helps them to pay attention to details. So you will see during the competition, they have questions that are just worth regular points, and then questions that are considered bonus questions. And this is where the entire team gets to answer. And sometimes it's, this is a bonus question worth 15 points or 20 points. So each answer is valued at 5. So if it's something where it's fill in the blank and they have 3 blanks, then each of those blanks will be worth 5 points. So you will want to write those type of questions, particularly for verses that are well known. So let's check out an example of a fill in the blank. All right, here we are in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. It says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Now here's how a fill in the blank question might go. Fill in the blanks. You shall love the Lord your God with all your blank and with all your blank and with all your blank. The answer is heart, soul, and might. Now, here is another one that helps our kids to memorize, particularly these verses that are considered well-known verses. So they may ask them to finish the verse. So they'll start the verse, and this will probably be a bonus question, right? So they'll say, this is worth 15 points, and they'll begin the verse, and then they'll have to finish the verse. So we typically write questions like this for verses that are well known, or verses that people often memorize. And so let's take a look at one of those verses. This one comes to us from the book of Amos, Amos 3:7. It says, "Surely the Lord God will do nothing, but he revealeth his secrets unto his servants, the prophet." Now, the question would go something like this. Finish the verse. Surely the Lord will do nothing, but he revealeth his secrets unto. The answer is unto his servants, the prophets. We come down to questions that I think are very, very important. And the reason why, and I've mentioned bonus questions before, right? So when you have a verse that lists like places, right? Or like tribes, and they'll say the Hittites, the Gergesites, the Canaanites, all the ites, right? So you want them to learn these verses that have listings, because this is where we get the biggest points. And like I said, bonus questions. So they'll say, this is a bonus question, name the 5 sons of, or name the 5 places, or name the 5 rivers. And so we want to pay particular attention to those verses that carry lists of things or people or places, because this is often where teams miss out on bonus points because they don't know these answers. So let's take a look at some potential bonus questions. Mark 3:16-19 said, "Simon he surnamed Peter, and James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James, and he surnamed them Boanerges, which is the sons of thunder, and Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas, and James the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, Judas Iscariot, which also betrayed him, and they went in unto his house." Now, here is how they might ask this question as a bonus question. Besides Peter, James, and John, name 4 of Jesus' disciples, and then they would list them: Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, Thaddeus, Simon, and Judas. Lastly, we don't see a lot of these, or I personally don't see a lot of these. They may ask for the scriptural reference for a particular verse. With those, we'll often pay attention to verses that are very popular. Like we mentioned before, verses that are often memorized, but we don't get a lot of those. I haven't seen a lot of those questions being asked. All right, here's a scriptural reference. "Therefore I say unto you, what things soever ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them." Where is this verse taken from? And the answer is Mark 11, verse 24. And lastly, here are some tips from our seasoned veteran coach, Wendy Neves Reed. Tip number 1, take note of descriptions, how people, places, and things are described. Tip number 2, take note of dialogues that are written, particularly who the speaker is and to whom the speaker is speaking. Tip number 3, read the entire book. Sometimes you will find that some stories are very similar. So reading the entire book will help you to not conflict with certain questions that might be a little bit similar, but reading the entire book will give you the full picture. And tip number 4, make sure that each question can stand alone. Put enough context clue in the question so that those hearing it will know exactly what section of the book you're asking about. So put enough context clue in your questions. All right, coaches, now that we've given you practical tips in this tutorial, we hope that this will help you as you delve in the books that have been assigned and write questions for our young scholars, and we hope that you enjoy the process. All righty, happy writing!